Dave Grohl fan.
Dave Grohl, yeah.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite humans.
You're talking about my tattoo.
Yeah, you're learning to fly tattoo on the inside of your forearm there?
Yeah. So this one's actually not Foo Fighters, though.
Okay.
This is Tom Petty.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Petty. That's my favorite song of all time. But yeah, Dave Grohl fan, too. I saw the Foo Fighters open up for Tom Petty, I believe. I saw Tom quite a few times throughout the years. So
I love Dave Grohl. I mean, obviously, he was a member of Nirvana. And so for any 90s kid, that's the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, between him trolling the Westboro Baptist Church, that's one of his favorite things in life.
Yeah.
Is to roll by them with like dressed up as Jesus, playing some good funky tunes and give them a lecture about loving people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then he also feeds homeless a lot. He has a big barbecue. He loves this, barbecue, smoked meat and stuff like that. And so he if there's a disaster or whatever in the area, he'll roll out the barbecue truck and trailer and just go give away a bunch of food to some great people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If we had more Dave Grohls in this world, it'd be awesome. And I love me some Tom Petty too.
Yeah. Just people like that in general. It's awesome to see you get to a certain level and it has to be like, how did I get all this stuff, right? And the people
what am I going to even do with it all?
Yeah, and the people that go out of their way, you hear a lot of cool stories about Shaq like that too.
So my aunt played basketball with him at Central Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was on the women's team.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just for whatever it's worth, subtle brag, but my aunt knows Shaq.
Nice.
And she said he's the most hilarious, realist-ass person you ever met in your life. Give you the shirt off of his back to help you, the whole thing. Willie Nelson, same thing. All those guys, that Oliver Anthony guy that just blew up. I mean, I love seeing real humans like that want to do good in the world with what they are. Keanu Reeves is another great one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can always tell the difference. Like, there's a lot of PR campaigns that say that, but there's the genuine, authentic people that live that, and I think that shines through most of the time. I don't know much about Oliver Anthony yet. I saw he got on Rogan. He had an episode of Rogan.
2.5 hours. I haven't watched it, but
neither have I.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's got to be a trip.
To go from a factory worker and a farmer's market vendor to it's going to be called Oliver Anthony at this point, from here on out. If anyone grabs that moment of fame like that, signed a $100 million record contract.
Did he actually sign one?
Yeah,
now?
They were offering him like 40 and 60, and he just basically made it into a big bidding war. And
the last time I saw, he was turning down most of the record deals that he was getting, but hopefully he found a good match. But man, I just can't imagine. That's kind of. It happened to him even faster than like the Zach Bryan story. Zach Bryan happened quickly, but he had at least a year to kind of wade through the waters because he was still in the military. So they had to. Did you ever hear that story? Did you?
A little bit of it. I haven't heard the whole thing.
Man, so he was telling this story, and finally his military leaders had a meeting with him and told him like it's kind of time to go, man. Like this is going to be not really a conflict of interest, but this is kind of like a distraction, and like you got some bigger fish to fry now. And he didn't know he was a big star, as big as he was. I still don't know that he does. Seems like a pretty humble guy. But man, yeah, I can't imagine that overnight fame.
Oh gosh,
yeah,
to go from just a fellow with the guitar singing in front of a deer blind while your dog watches you. By the way, that deer blind in the background in that video is totally shot. He's not going to be able to hunt that thing for opener.
Everybody's going to know it.
Although I imagine he'll get him a new one. But yeah, to weeks later, what did he have? Like 17,000 people packed into that little venue there at Maggie's farm. And from there, just it went even more nuts. So
yeah,
congratulations to him on being him.
100%. Yeah, it's amazing to see that happen. How everybody wants to start painting their pictures, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just happy for the dude. I don't even know him yet, but it's awesome to see somebody. I
love that he didn't lose himself in all this yet. He's still,
not yet.
He's just that simple, humble ass guy that, and he's so far maintained that, and I really like that. That's what'll get him through life. And I believe he's in talks with Willie Nelson to take over Farm Aid or do something big with Farm Aid.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know one of my colleagues said she's going to, she's volunteering at Farm Aid in Indiana this year. So
yeah, I grew up in Indiana. So Farm Aid's a big part of, culture and life if you're an American farmer growing up in Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah, hence the Colts fanship, right? So
Yes. Yeah, go Coats.
Man, so what got you into mushrooms? Talking about, growing up and stuff. Has it always been a thing? What got you
A
into
little
mushrooms?
bit. I mean, I like food. So this is some of the best food out there. Um, I grew up poor, and so with that, you hunt, you fish, and you forage. And so my grandfather was a career Air Force man, and he was always going to the library, and he taught me how to teach myself anything as a small child. And I would get in trouble a lot and get locked in my room with books too, so that didn't hurt anything. But and I love outside, so it just kind of all came together, and I began to find out about edible stuff and wild medicine whenever I was a little kid, and then later on became an adventure sports guide and learned how to use that to scrounge up a meal or scrounge up elements to make a meal better. Especially when you're eating dehydrated crap food in the middle of nowhere, a few fresh mushrooms and a couple of decent plants go a long way to liven things up. And then later on, I started the farm after I sold the whitewater rafting company. I became dad, and I wanted to raise my kids on farm. Well, produce and livestock, all that stuff. But I started dabbling with mushrooms, and it didn't take long for people who were lined up for those mushrooms. They didn't care about the 15 different kinds of cherry tomatoes or the kale or the best lettuce around so much. They were there for the mushrooms, lined up for the market started, and that kind of just started the whole journey going to where I am now. Boy, what a ride it's been.
Yeah. How long has it been?
Well, my son's 9, and whenever I found out I was going to be a dad's when I started the farm full time.
Okay.
So he'll be 10 in March.
Nice.
So cruising up on a decade of full-time farming.
Yeah. So it was kind of the focusing on mushrooms was kind of led by demand. Organic farming in general is a passion of yours, but
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. No matter how good you are at produce or livestock, monkey see, monkey do, right? So whatever creativity you're bringing to the table this year, next year, everybody else is going to emulate that to your detriment, probably, right? With fungi, especially at the time I started messing with them, there really wasn't a ton of information and resources available. It was more of a faux pas still and very culty, And then since then, Paul Stamets and fantastic fungi on Netflix and Facebook groups and everything else kind of blown all the doors wide open. But during that time period, it was just kind of a thing that I'd always kind of liked. I like mushrooms, they're delicious. And it's a thrill of the chase, too, And to be honest with you, you want to stand in a hot field or in a hoop house working or in a smelly old animal barn, or you want to be in the shade.
yeah.
That's a pretty easy choice for a guy like me who loves nature and has always been an outdoorsman. I get to walk around in the forest and collect mushrooms as part of my job. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the ecological parts of mushrooms are, I think, just so fascinating, right? Like we were talking a little bit earlier about how the mushrooms do the work for soil amendments and stuff like that. But I recently learned, and you can confirm this is just one of those in passing things, but a mushroom is closer in biology to a human than like a tomato plant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at the tree of life or, the evolution, right? So plants and fungi, plants evolved out of fungi, and the evidence for this would be mosses and lichens, where they're pretty much half mushroom, half plant, right? Long ago, and then animals began to evolve out of fungi much, much later. So we're basically giant mushrooms that have encapsulated everything versus them, all their nervous system, the heart, so to speak, it's all external. And so but we have nearly identical immune system. They breathe oxygen in and CO2 out just like we do. And there's a lot of other parallels, but yeah, we're basically just giant walking, talking mushrooms that think that we're sentient,
Yeah, that's wild. And I learned a long time ago, there's that, like, supposedly, I don't know if this is true, the biggest mushroom like in the world in Crystal Falls or whatever.
So there's some conjecture here. We have to add the word contiguous. Contiguous means one big item, right?
Okay.
So there's another site in Oregon at the Mauer Wildlife Refuge, which I believe was the site of the Bundy standoff. Where the government murdered that guy, and he was shot. Anyway, so that one is big as well, and it's big enough to be seen from space, but it's pockets. And so as a sum total, all of the pockets, in that area make up a larger site. Now, the thing with the crystal site is it's still not known how large it is. We're still sampling, and every time they sample, it gets about 100 times bigger. So it could very well be the biggest, but it is proven to be the largest single site, meaning the crystal site is bigger than any of the other sites in Oregon, as long as you don't count them all as one big one. So it's a little bit of fun fact. And if you see the Michigan U-Haul truck, that's why there's a giant mushroom on the side of it, if you didn't know that.
I didn't, no.
Yeah, so you know how U-Haul does the state theme? Well, Michigan's is the mushroom because of the humongous fungus, right? The honey mushroom in Alpha, Michigan.
That's fascinating. So how does that work? Like when a mushroom does that, what part of it is below the ground and what is it that comes up?
So what we think of as a mushroom is a fruiting body, much like an apple tree gives off an apple, right? So the actual organism itself would be what looks like white threads in the soil or on wood, or in this case, since it's a honey mushroom, there'll be rhizomorphs, which are thicker black strands, but it's predominantly just that white mycelia. Now, we think of it as a tube, but if we zoom in, that's actually a subway system, right? So it's shuttling nutrients in every direction. And when we look at the landscape around us, the entire landscape is made of this architecturally, from the tip of the top of the tree and every leaf in it, all the way down to the very root. That tree is basically one giant mushroom architecturally, as far as those strands go, with plant tissue in between. And so it moves nutrients from the very tip of the tree all the way through the soil food web. And then in the soil, of course, it is just one giant dimensional spider web or architectural spider web of that mycelium that's every direction all around you at all times. And there are thousands of different kinds of mushrooms that may make up that, but they all work together in some way, shape, or form to shuttle.
So I just picture when hearing you say that, I picture this network of you called it a subway system, but of veins that just run throughout the entire natural world that can, how do they determine where they pop up the fruit?
Oh, yeah, that's so it could be climatic conditions, it could be soil type, it could be this tree owns this one, portion of real estate and it lives with that tree in symbiosis. Of course, then there are mushrooms that occur on dead and rotting things. Otherwise, there'd be T-Rex carcasses stacked everywhere still. And those come off of that, either the rot, quote unquote, meaning that the tree that it's on, or the stump, or whatever, maybe a piece of wood on the ground, or it could be coming out of the terrestrial or the dirt associated with it. That's part of the real estate that mushroom owns is a complex relationship. So it gets real fun in a hurry. There are mushrooms that occur underwater. There are mushrooms that occur just in the Arctic underneath the snow. It's insane. If there's a chance for life to occur, there's a good chance that fungi have figured out a way for it to happen on this planet at this point.
Man, that's crazy. That's so crazy. That has to be one of those things where you just dive in and you can never learn too much about it.
Oh gosh, no, we're still discovering new stuff all the time. One of the really cool things that hit the world this year and that come out of the mycological world was that mushrooms thermoregulate. So when we're out, they heat and cool themselves. We already know this as cultivators because there could be snow sitting on top of a mushroom that's cold weather specific, and it could melt and then begin to regrow again, right? During the melt freeze cycle, and both spring and autumn, this is pretty common. And so this, kind of anomaly with that antifreeze led some people down a pretty interesting path. And what they found was that the fruiting bodies thermoregulate too as part of this. So if it's a hot day and I'm morel hunting and I take a thermal image camera out, those morels glow like solid white on your thermal image, so you can morel hunt a lot more effectively in a hurry for whatever it's worth. And same thing on a cool day, really, really cool day, they kind of pop as a hotter spot in the landscape. And so that's just something that just hit the world this year regarding mushrooms. And it's just one of those really amazing things. And there's always something like this coming out.
So now there's a lot of people probably trying to figure out how they do that, right? Yeah. That's the first thing that comes to your mind.
Yeah, how is this possible? And that's how fungi are. It's they're just oddly mysterious, and they're the fastest growing sector of biotech. And what I'm really trying to say is that mycology is the fastest growing sector of biology. We know a lot about plants. We've been studying them forever. But we really don't know that much about fungi as a whole, as a human species. And this is, one of those last great unknowns to explore scientifically. And I'm just lucky to be a citizen scientist in the middle of it and get to do my own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's it like foraging in our neck of the woods? What are some of the main ones you find? What do people like at the farmers markets? What do you like?
Right. So all the classics that we would consider here in North America, which would be morels, chicken of the woods, all the of the woods, so hen of the woods, shrimp of the woods, things like that. Obviously, chanterelles, the lobster mushroom, the hedgehog mushroom, black trumpets. Those are kind of fan favorites, so to speak. There are others, but that's a pretty decent-sized little list to get started with. Foraging here is unlike foraging anywhere else. And I say that because our forest ecotypes are very distinct here. Where I live, 100 miles north of Green Bay in the UP, around Iron Mountain, is where the boreal forest coming down from Canada and the Arctic collides with the eastern hardwoods, all the oaks around us, right? And then in addition to that, we've got the western forest, which is those cottonwoods and aspens coming out of the plains and those riparian zones. That collides too. So we have 3 different ecotypes colliding here. And if you get up high, you may see one. You get down low, you may see another. And you get down near a bend in the river, you could see all 3. And so because of that diversity of tree species, and then also coupled with our short decomposition window where I live, which means that from the time that the snow melts to the time the snow flies again, everything has to rot. And that's the only window of rot, right? And so it's a more accelerated timeline. So I get to see things in much more rapid sequence than someone else may who lives somewhere where it doesn't snow or it very rarely snows. Their mushroom season is spread out much, much longer across the year versus ours is kind of jam-packed one on top of the other. So we're the last people to see spring mushrooms for the U.S. in the spring, but we're the first people to see them for autumn mushrooms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have certain type of times of the year where you cook certain meals because those mushrooms are available?
Yeah, eat locally, eat seasonally, right? That's the essence of local food is when things are in, you try to take advantage of that. And then you try to preserve the harvest, of course, as well. So if you ask me what my favorite mushroom is, it's going to be whichever one's about to come in this season that I haven't had for a year, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Man, that's fascinating. So that kind of you opened up your new business with the mushroom food plots, and that was one part that you answered. I didn't know that. You said there's some in the Arctic that can go under snow, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. What are those late season mushrooms, and can they survive when more and more people get into the woods as we get closer to the rut and stuff? Because you think of how food plot activity changes and stuff like that at that time of year. That could be a hidden gem, man. I'm sure it's what led you to the idea, but what's the concept of it?
So deer eat fungi. This predates all of our human involvement in habitat management. I've been able to uncover research as far back as the late 1880s. So right from the very get-go of American gamekeepership, it's been there. The scientists that have dealt with it, and then all the way up to the 60s and the early 70s, there was a huge push about how important this was to the deer. And then I believe the rise of psychedelic culture stunted that or eliminated it from the discussion, and browse kind of took over as the basis instead of mast. Mushrooms are soft mast. If you're a habitat manager, you understand mast. Mast is acorns and apples and berries and so on. And mushrooms fit into that as well. So we have hard mast and soft mast. Chestnuts, oaks, acorns, those are hard mast, soft mast. Cool. Soft mast is more palatable, especially to older animals like an old buck with worn down teeth. So it's a big draw, and it's also a huge source of phosphorus for them. There's a fair amount of calcium in there. Is probably their biggest source of vitamin D. And there's about 30% mushrooms, depending on which type of, 30% protein in mushrooms, depending on which type of mushroom we're talking about. There's also a decent amount of water-soluble fat. And there's a lot of water in mushrooms too. So for an animal that, doesn't like the frequent watering holes where predators may be, getting water in your diet is a big part of it as well. But the real factor is that mushrooms are composed of chitin or chitin, right? If you're a beef farmer, you know what chitinase is or chitinase is, which is an additive you add to your beef feed to increase the nutrient solubility and uptake. And that's basically lobster shells and crab shells and cheap chitin that they can get, right, from waste resource. Well, mushrooms are the most readily and biosoluble form of chitin. And so these deer, at least 25% of their diet, at least. And there's a lot of numbers that go back and forth. There's some reports out of, especially in the late 70s or late 60s when this is being studied, could suggest as much as 70% or more of their diet during hunting season in those areas was fungi related. So as we progress into hunting season, obviously at the beginning of hunting season for all of us that are archery hunters, there's more opportunities because there are more fungi in the landscape. But as things begin to senesce in the world around us, the menu becomes smaller. And that's where we can really take advantage of it if you have mushrooms and they're not available around you, or there's very few in the landscape and you've got a large amount. So there are ways to go about that. But as they go into decline, there are fewer and fewer. And those targeted species become more and more important. And with regards to mushrooms appearing underneath the snow blanket, that does happen. And the most easily observable version of this is going to be, let's say we have a snow blanket sits here for a month or so here in Green Bay, and then it all melts kind of rapidly. You ever see the snow mold covering the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like cobwebs and spider webs, right? Mm-hmm. That's mycelium, brother. That's fungi literally coming out of the ground to eat stuff underneath there. So there's specific cold weather stuff. And there are also mushrooms that can and do fruit under those scenarios. And we're just beginning to learn about all this. And so I don't have any strategy for those under the snow mushrooms yet, but I have a pretty good strategy for the early part of the season for us up here, all the way into about freeze up.
Mm-hmm. Which, the last few winters gets you really close to that neighborhood anyway, because, we haven't been really seeing snow until mid to late November anyway.
Right. And then putting the food source there is going to make the deer do things biologically like scrape and rub there. And then even if there's not food there, you put out a bowl of food on your back porch every night for a whole summer, and then you take it away. It doesn't matter if it's been not there for a week or so. They're still going to come check to see if there's a meal, right? And then in addition to that, they're still going to come check that scrape. They're just going to continue. That's part of their strategy is to move through that area, right? They're going to look. And so even if the food's not there, you still have a spot where they're going to more than likely travel through and give you an opportunity. It's way easier to kill a deer in the woods than it is on an open field. Anyone who's a hunter will tell you that. Deer don't like to be out in the open. It's against their nature. So we do this in shade and in cover back in the timber. We don't have to have open ground to grow a mushroom. We actually need it to grow in the woods because it loves shade.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some fascinating kind of research and like collar studies that show like the size of an area that especially a mature buck will stay in. And they get up and feed frequently, but it's within 100 yards of where they are, Much easier to do that with mushrooms and having that be their source of food than it is to what, we think of a deer going out in a clover field.
Exactly.
Or something like
so
that.
last year I broke a bow limb a week before the start of archery opener. And I was given a loner crossbow that it wasn't going to work. It was going to skip an arrow off, and I don't wound deer. I'm out there to do clean, ethical kills. So long story short, I just left that in my truck and I took my camera and I would go cut a track, the biggest buck track I could cut. Then I'd follow that into bedding, and I'd probably jump them out most of the time, but I would document what mushrooms were being eaten in those bedding areas, and I did it over and over and over and over and over and over throughout the whole season. Right, I ended up eating my restricted tag, which in Michigan is 4 points plus on one side, basically because I blew up too many of my good spots by doing this. And then when late season came around, it just wasn't working out for me. But long story short was, you're right. They get up and they move. There's no such thing as an October lull. They know that the pressure's on. It's all human pressure. If there was no human pressure, they'd get up and move across those fields like you always see them. But the moment someone shoots an arrow at them or one of their friends, everything changes. And then as more and more humans pile in, more and more changes, right? So finding those pockets and those spots that are overlooked and have food in them, whether it's a white oak tree or a bunch of red oaks or mushrooms and white oaks, right? That's the name of the game whenever you're looking for one specific animal. You've got to find his bed, you got to find out what he's eating, and you've got to take advantage of one of those things. And so what I try to do is get between food and bedding, as close as I can to bedding without jumping them off. and try to intercept on the way out. I don't like to hunt over food plots. I have food plots. It's a labor of love, and they're getting to be beautiful, but I don't hunt on them. I hunt back off of them 20, 30 yards in the timber. I'm trying to catch them coming in and going out, or even further back in the timber, right? And that's just a great strategy for all deer hunters, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what this reminds me of? You're talking about what composes a mushroom and why they might eat them. I learned recently that I don't know if it's all species of elephants, but an elephant, they have proven that the female elephants will eat a specific plant at a certain time in the year when they're pregnant, because they know that it induces labor. So like elephants take medicine.
Yeah.
And they've taught themselves that over the
So deer
course
are
of
no
history.
exception to that. They're what we call highly selective frugivores, which means that they'll eat one leaf off of this plant and two leaves off of that plant. And the dietary nutrition of those plants, in that specific time frame, is a high draw to them. They only have so much room for food in their stomachs. They're ruminants, like cow, right? They can only fit so much through there, so they're extremely selective. They pretty much eat the best of everything. They're like little hobbits, so to speak. They relish good food and the creature comforts of home.
So do we.
Yeah. What's not to love? Yeah. And so they really take it to the high degree. So I'm not surprised in the least little bit that the animals know this. How they know it, that's a tough one. I don't think that we may never know that, but for whatever reason, they do.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned like the combination of the knowledge depth that we have around mushrooms earlier. When you think of that, and then you mentioned kind of what happened throughout the course of history in like the 60s and 70s and the pushback on the psycho effects, or the psychiatric effects of all of the things that pushed back on substance use and stuff like that. Did some of that lead to our lack of knowledge about mushrooms, probably?
And it goes much, much earlier in human history than that. Let's go to Egyptian and Roman times. You as a common person could be put to death for eating the king's mushrooms, so to speak. You're not allowed. It's reserved for upper echelon of society only, right? It's food of the gods. Literally in the Egyptian culture, this is food of the gods. You're not allowed to touch this. You're a common person. This is for high priestess and the pharaoh and things of that nature. And that translates all the way through. When we're talking about Robin Hood and the king's forest and shooting a deer, there's a lot of truth to that. In that feudal system, you weren't allowed to forage for food because that's the king's food. You have to grow food for the king to sell and, blah, blah, blah.
And then you get your rations back from them. Yeah.
Exactly. So control, right? As Americans, though, we have this distinct legacy. We're the first people in the world that the fish in the rivers belong to everyone. The game on the land belongs to everyone. The things that grow upon the land, especially in our public spaces, belong to everyone. The food belongs to everyone. Now, a large part of that's because of our, I'm Indian, right? My dad's a half-breed, right? I'm Potawatomi. Aho, my Anishinaabe people, if you're out there listening. So with that, this has always been part of our food. Can you imagine, on top of everything else from the Europeans, if they came over and said, whoa, you can't eat those fish, those mushrooms, and those deers. Get bent, fella. You just lost all your credibility, right? So as part of our American psyche and with the frontier and, that expansionism and our manifest destiny, being able to harvest our own food from the landscape is just ingrained on us. And we're the first people to ever spark that light in the world. The rest of the world's national parks and the freedom of their fishing and hunting, that all comes from us, right? For whatever it's worth. But before that, that those things that were upon the landscape, those were, for the rulers of society. And so the mycophobia has been trained into us over generations and generations and generations. That being said, there are still a lot of cultures that really love mushrooms. The Bulgarian, almost all of the Eastern European bloc, right? The Bulgarians, the Germans, the French. Then we get up in the Swedes and the Norwegians, the Asian, especially Southeast Asians, really love mushrooms. And it goes to other parts of the world as well. There are a lot of indigenous cultures that truly love mushrooms. But the mycophobia that we have ingrained in us as Americans, it was probably a double hit from psychedelics and the pushback against it, as well as some of that just bubbling subconscious from, stay away from mushrooms, they'll kill you. And
That's what I was going to ask, if there's an innate part of this, like a human, aspect that we have to get around or get over. Because, like, you equate it to something where being scared of bees or spiders, for example, or something where it's a lot of times not rational, but at the same time, there's this innate thing in us that says that could kill you for some reason. That has to exist somewhat with
so it's
mushrooms.
almost like the person who is that irrationally afraid of bees, or spiders. They'll say that we had an arachnophobic as our spokesperson for spiders. Well, yeah, we're all going to be arachnophobic.
Yeah.
If the guy in charge is telling us don't like spiders.
Right.
I love spiders. They do amazing things in my garden and in my grow room and so on and so forth. They're extremely deadly plants. They're extremely deadly berries. There's extremely deadly animals. There's extremely deadly everything. Mushrooms are no exception. Driving down the road can be an extremely deadly thing, right? Walking in your bathroom is the most dangerous thing we do. Wet floor in a bathroom, and most likely spot to die, other than your car. So, yes, it's, there's cause for alarm. You should definitely know the enemy, so to speak. And there'll be 2 or 3 really deadly mushrooms across most of the U.S. There might be a handful of small outliers. And if you avoid a family we call LBMs, or little brown mushrooms, right, you just wiped out almost all of them but one. Just by doing that. And so whenever I lead my forays and I'm out teaching people about mushrooms, I kind of communicate that LBM theory, that's the genus leverite. Lever right there, right? That's a little brown mushroom. We don't ask about those. We just keep removing. And so that takes most of them off the table. And then there's one that's white, and it's all white, has a white bulb, has a white stem, has a white annulus or ring, white gills, white top, the whole thing, right? Top to bottom, as white as all can be, just a cracker of the woods, so to speak, right? And it's extremely deadly. It's a member of a group of mushrooms called the destroying angel complex, or people call them the deadly angels, or whatever it may be. There's a bunch of different misnomer names, but and that one be fairly common. You see it, I see it in lawns, around trees a lot. It's a European invasive species, as far as I understand it. And it is deadly. One mushroom could be enough to kill a lot of people. And it's also extremely easy to identify and stay away from. Mm-hmm. So knowing your enemy is always the best.
Isn't there one that has like a bright red cap that's deadly? That's kind of famous.
Okay, so it's not deadly. It's everything. All right. The difference between toxicity and medicine can be dosage or application. Okay, so it's the Amanita muscaria. Right, it's the quintessential red mushroom with the white dots on it. Alice in Wonderland. If you saw Smurf's house, it would be that. The whole thing. It is not deadly, but it can be because it's the origin of Christmas ornaments too. Do you know that story? Cool. So about Saturnalia, the Vikings festival of light. Okay, just know of it.
Yep.
So they would take these Amanita mushrooms, and they grow with spruce trees primarily, and they would take them and they would put them up in the boughs of those spruce trees to dry, or the squirrels would. Squirrels like to grab mushrooms and put them up to dry, like this too. And during the winter, they would grab those and they would make a big communal tea out of them. And all the small children and the old folks, so they would go to this other part of the village with like a fence around it. And then everybody else that was left would imbibe, in this libation. And when this libation wasn't a happy-go-lucky mushroom trip, it's a Viking berserker session. Literally, that's where the Viking berserkers came from. They would drink this magic mushroom, only it would make them behave like they're on methamphetamines. They would basically have huge orgies and street fights. Right. So next time your family's fighting at Christmas, know that you're celebrating the Viking origin. So that mushroom, if you take it and you ran it through boiling water and changed out the water, now it's edible. Right. Of course, if you kept that, you feed it to the reindeer, and then, after the reindeer filter it out, there's, that wives' tale about them drinking it.
I've heard that one. Yeah.
Right. So they more or less just made tea out of it. whether it went through the animal or whatever it may be, and they enjoyed that. Right. So that's what we're alluding to, is that Amanita muscaria in this circumstance. Not deadly. It's toxic, but the toxicity is psychoactive. Psilocybin, the magic mushroom family, is toxic as well in that regard, but it doesn't stop anyone, does it?
Right. Yeah, and I must be mistaken because I thought there was one that was
Oh.
toxic as deadly.
Not on the Amanita. I mean, there are some Amanitas that are, but not that red and white that I'm aware of. I
Okay.
could be wrong. I can get an email from somebody saying you're an idiot. Wouldn't be the first time.
So little brown mushroom, stay away from. That's weird because when you think of a mushroom that we eat, they're little brown mushrooms.
Yeah, and we're talking diminutive, a couple of inches tall at the most, usually a spindly stem, and there could be hundreds of them on one tree kind of thing.
Yeah, those ones I think that's like the first thing you learn as a mushroom forager, right? The ones with the long stems that look like they could tip over at any time, and generally a pretty small cap too, right? Those are the ones.
So most people that die from mushroom poisoning are looking for drugs, right? So they made a bad identification, and usually a little brown mushroom involved, and that's what happened. So it'd be the Galerina in particular, the funeral bell mushroom that we're trying to avoid. And if you're not a trained eye, you could easily confuse that for enoki or psilocybin. Especially the wood-loving psilocybins, or if it's growing on a buried root and it looks like that mushroom's growing from the ground when in fact it's growing from a buried root. There could be some error there.
Yeah. And I think part of your business is, and a question I asked, I was going to ask you for people that have never foraged or anything, but I know people grow mushrooms now, and I think that's part of your business.
Oh yeah.
How a buddy of mine used to do it a little bit, so I know about you get a log and put it in the plugs and stuff like that. But how do you do that at home? Hearing that kind of vein thing that you were talking about earlier makes it seem like it'd be hard to cultivate, but this must be a different way to go about that.
So the mushrooms we generally cultivate are going to be wood-loving species. There are the exceptions, which are the agaricus we find in the grocery store that are, the white buttons and the portobello cremini. That's all they're basically all the same mushroom. White buttons has a genetic freak thing going on where it doesn't produce melanin, and then the portobello cremini are all the same mushroom. It's just the baby bellas are smaller and the portobellos are larger. You get it, right? So it's just a grade thing when it comes to those names. Those grow on manure. They grow on waste and refuse, particularly. So we generally call it body and nutrition mushrooms, which means that the manure has grass in it, and that is partially or completely digested by the ruminant, and there's some body or structure there for the mushroom to grow on, and that cellulose and lignin that's been digested. And then the nutrition aspect, which would be all the nitrogen and other trace elements that are present in the manure. So that's expensive to do, and that's usually subsidized. The subsidized crop is where the government pays them to sell at a certain point and gives them a check to make up the difference, right? So you never go out of business. Mm-hmm. You've always got somebody there to rescue you, which is great for that farm. Most of those farms are corporate, right? And so they're the welfare kings, or so to speak, right? I always get mad when people get mad about humans being on welfare. Brother, get business off of welfare, especially in ag. Let the market set themselves. But so those are almost all produced by one county in Pennsylvania, or one of the increasing trends is to fill up a shipping container in China, and then as it's coming across the ocean, they can adjust the temperature in there and the climate in there and fruit those mushrooms in there. And then when it gets to the U.S. shores, they can pick it all, and that's USDA organic now, right? Especially with shiitake. This is, Then they empty the shipping container and send something else back. It's a big racket for them, right? So USDA organic, awesome stuff. This is also why I recommend you eat local mushrooms, because you know where they were grown and who grew them. We grow on wood-loving species, so whether it's sawdust and straw, or on logs themselves, or even sawdusted with some supplemented materials like soybean hulls or beet pulp shred or alfalfa or whatever it may be inside of a bag. That's called bag culture, or synthetic logs. So I try to grow everything outdoors that I possibly can, like our shiitake, second to none. It's world class when it's grown outdoors. Those are worth $20 plus a pound, $30 plus a pound. But when you grow them in the bags in a shipping container, that's a totally different product. And that's a bunch of crap in comparison. It's worth about $7 a pound. So they both say shiitake, but which one's the good stuff, right? Okay. And then medicinally, the stuff that's grown indoors, so say you're buying lion's mane from somebody online for neuropathy or whatever it may be. Well, it was grown in a clinical setting in a laboratory. That lion's mane never had a struggle. It didn't meet any bacteria and viruses in its life to code against. So it's not medicinally charged. However, whenever a mushroom grows outside in the real world, in contact with the environment, it now has to fight off bacteria and viruses at every step of the way. So it's medicinally charged. It has those materials in it that are coded against for that fight. And just like we spoke to earlier, our immune systems are identical. So those compounds that help them work for us. So I try to grow outside as much as possible. There are some things that I just can't do outside, like grow oysters very well. I mean, I can grow them, but they'll be full of bugs. My patrons really don't like that. And so you have to do those either indoors or in a protected setting, which good luck protecting them outdoors. So you got to do them indoors. So long story short, I grow a lot of different mushrooms, 20 plus different kinds. And I've been experimenting with years and years of, well, what if I try this with this mushroom? And I capture mushrooms, which means I go find one. And I say, well, this mushroom grows saprotrophically, which means it'll grow on dead and dying, wood. Well, what if I take a sample of it and I bring it back to my lab and I grow it on a petri dish and I expand it out and grow it on grains and then on wood and see if I can cultivate this? And sure as could be, you kind of work within parameters, and then you got to remember it's a wild animal. So it's like building a zoo enclosure and introducing a wild animal. You want it to replicate and do well, but there's no guarantees. And it could be years before you find out your experiment worked or not too. So it's a really unique and interesting, different world than most other agricultural endeavors.
Yeah. So when you take a sample like that and then you grow it from a petri dish, is that just like cutting a piece of that vein out and bringing it home?
Yeah, it's more or less cloning. It's exactly what it is. Mushroom farmers are just glorified cloners.
Sure.
And janitors. We do a lot of cleaning.
Yeah, I suppose. So talking about your shiitakes, I was going to ask that. How'd you get to Shiitake Creek being the name of your business?
Okay, so Shiitake Creek. Man, I've been an adventure sports guide for a long time. I have a class 4 and 5 whitewater guide for a lot of years. The running jokes, I've always been up shit creek, brother. I'm great with the paddle. Bring it on, And so, I don't know, I just started kicking around names, and I really like that name, and it kind of fits me as a human. I've got a weird sense of humor, and all right, let's do this. So Shiitake Creek it was and is. It's I'm kind of transitioning it hopefully for my kids to run. And just the local farmers market, nothing crazy. I'll still teach some classes, and the mushroom and deer thing at my other business has really started to explode. So I don't mind taking a step back. I've been fruiting and doing all this hard work. I mean, basically you're a logger and a janitor, and those are some tough gigs, brother. And of course, farmer on top of it all, So after doing all this for a long time, I'd sure like to give my back a rest and use my brain for the rest of my life wherever possible, and let my son and my daughter learn how to earn $1.
Yeah. I was just going to say that. You get to a point eventually doing most things where your knowledge is worth more than your output sometimes. And finding a way to disseminate that knowledge is always interesting. It's a journey, but absolutely. When you have, a lifetime of that style of thing, whatever that thing is, and it's ready to come out, the knowledge becomes worth more than the product, because then you can teach others to make the product, and it's exponential.
Yeah, my wife is always saying something to the effect of like, I just can't believe, I can't believe your skill set, or every time I think I really know you, and we've been married over a decade now, and I find out that you're good at this thing that I didn't even know about, and I'm like, yeah, I got a lot of useless skills,
but a lot of useful ones too.
Yeah, if you're not an outdoorsman, woodsman, I don't know how good they are for society. You know what I mean? So it's lucky for me, I live in the middle of nowhere.
It's all relative, man. It's all relative. Useful means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. There's people that buy your mushrooms that would call that useful.
Yeah, that's true.
Very much so.
And I'm blessed to have them as a customer base. We have some of the best customers that I ever dreamed of. I've always said we cultivate relationships and we grow mushrooms. And I believe that that's 100% true. And the people of Green Bay and Marquette and the entire UP, but Iron Mountain, where we live in particular, have been just extremely kind to us over the years. And I can never say thank you enough to them.
Yeah. It's it's part of why we buy these days, when you can connect with the person behind it, and it's easy to, when someone's passionate about something, you can tell, and it's that transfers, that it helps with the transfer of that energy and knowledge, like you were talking about. That's another thing you do, right? Don't you do guided forages where you give kind of the 101 of searching? So what does that entail?
I'm a little different than a lot of people. I don't pick on the forage. You do. Right, I'm not going to take a single. I might take if we find a lot of mushrooms, I'm going to take a couple home for dinner, maybe. But generally speaking, you're taking them all. So you almost always end up with more mushrooms, value than the class was itself. I can never guarantee it because it's all climatic conditions. But I've only had one foray to date where they didn't walk away with more mushrooms than they paid, that were worth more than what they paid for the class. And usually it's like a lot more. So it's not just on the class, though. You get me as a resource. You have my phone number. You can send me pictures. What is this? Do you know what this is? How do I find more of it? Whatever the question may be, that's part of it, too. Once again, we cultivate relationships, right? So I love taking the classes out. I broke my foot a few weeks ago, and so I'm about 4 weeks into the healing process. So it's been a labor of love this year. But I'm getting around pretty good, and I found out that most folks are fine with me going a little slower in the process, which is great because I thought I was going too fast. So, but yeah, it's a wonderful thing. I love taking people out, and Jesus said, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for his whole life. Well, that's my whole goal is you'd be able to walk out this time of the year forever after this, and you'll be able to find yourself a meal for yourself and your family. And we just kind of start with that where, we'll say every few weeks or a month or whatever, you learn one new mushroom. And then you do that for years, and all of a sudden you're a mushroom expert too. That's all it takes is just you got to start somewhere. We'll give you a base point.
Yeah. Yeah, and you talked earlier about guiding in your younger years. What type of guiding?
Oh, man, I have conservation corps, and I worked with Texas Forest Service, was a wildland firefighter, and mostly whitewater guide. I did a lot of whitewater rafting. I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
Heck, brother, rock climbs, mountaineering, a lot of search and rescue too. Just all over.
Yeah. So that part of maybe that's why you're going so fast because you're comfortable.
Yeah.
In the woods, but a lot of that probably seeps out too. It's not just a mushroom hunt, probably.
Sure.
You end up with that.
A lot of those useless woodsman skills, so to speak. Like I cleaned up Hurricane Katrina with some friends of mine. We were there pretty shortly after the storm. Well, the biting gnats are ferocious. No-see-ums down there. So I did a video yesterday, and there are gnats all around my face, and I ended up just like this with my hat over my head during the video, and I didn't really think about it. And I realized during that live video what I was doing. I had to stop and explain. If you hold your hat above your head, them gnats go to your hat instead of your face. Right? And that's just one of those things that you never learn. Off doesn't work on those no-see-ums. The only thing it does is Avon Skin So Soft, right? And if you put Skin So Soft on in the sun, you're going to turn crispy brown real fast. So the only trick that works is when you stop, you put your hat above your head, and they go to it. And so there's just a million little things like that. If you get stung by a bee, and I look around and tell you which plant to put on it, or if someone has tobacco, we get that tobacco wet and stick it on there, and it'll pull the poison out and numb the pain, and the whole thing real quick. And just, I learned 1,000 little things like that along the ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I wanted to talk about today, we started to touch on it earlier, but it's awesome to see some of the Netflix shows you were talking about kind of started speaking to this, but just research and public research in general around the benefits of the psychoactive benefits of, psilocybin and the mushroom, what it can do for our brain health. and it becoming not so much of a faux pas to research and share that research now with PTSD and stuff like that. Have you delved into any of that stuff?
I
at
know
all?
a lot about the subject of psychedelics. I've indulged. I was young once and stupid, and I had a lot of fun in a lot of places. And it was one of the most spiritual experiences of my life. I'm going to throw that out there right off the gate before we go any further. I love the legitimate science on this. Johns Hopkins University has done an amazing job. Michael Pollan's book a few years ago, How to Change Your Mind, is a really great resource.
That's the one that
anyone.
got turned into
Yep.
a Netflix series.
It did.
Yeah.
You've got it. There are a lot of applications for PTSD, for end-of-life treatment, for neurological disorders, Parkinson's, things like that, because it's an electrical firestorm, a thunderstorm. It basically ramps your neurological circuit up and opens new pathways or repairs old ones. So there are instances of people being able to hear again, right? People with limited vision getting clearer vision, things of that nature. But it's really, really been good for the psychological effect of it all, right? Coming to peace with your mortality in particular has shown a lot of promise for that end of life treatment, especially with people who are terminal, right? So I love the science aspect of it, and there are more and more universities doing legitimate science of it. And the recreational value of it is there, but it kind of denigrates all the other work. So I try to stay away from the recreational, Plus, I'm the most obvious source of that. So I don't want to be, the last thing I want is a bunch of dudes kicking in my door with a machine gun pointing into my family, because so I don't mess with it. But with decriminalization on the horizon, and there are a lot of municipalities in the state of Michigan where I live who have decriminalized. And me being the mushroom guy for 10 years in a town that has a bunch of weed dispensaries in it, I would like to be poised to take advantage of that from a business standpoint when the day comes. But other than that, I don't mess with it at all right now. It's just not on my list. And we don't really get psilocybin that grows wild here. So it has to be cultivated. You're not going to walk around and pick them in the cow patty, at least up north. You get a little further south maybe.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I started delving into that. I can't remember her name, but Rogan had a fantastic guest on. She had been a lifetime researcher of the useful effects of psychoactive effects of mushrooms. Unbelievable to hear her talk about the things that they were able to prove, so to say, but it was in the 70s when they couldn't, no one would listen.
When they would stifle everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you said anything, there was such a violent suppression of anyone who had any counterculture whatsoever, including expansion of your mind and free thinking. Are you kidding me? When we came out of the 50s, all our parents were beaten for talking during dinner time or whatever. There was no individuality present there. It was conformity. So it's a shame that our society went through all this, but at the same time, if it hadn't happened, we wouldn't be where we were. So we got to take the good with the bad. I'm very excited about the future of all of this, and I hope that as human beings, we can get the medicine to the people who need it, because that's one of life's worst travesties is someone can't afford their medication or their medication's not available because of societal norms. But then to the ultra rich, they can go out of the country and grab it. I don't think that's kind of that's not what this country's about. Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to be anyway.
Yeah, I think so. A recent experience tells me we're close to a place, at least with this topic. I took a trip over the summer, and one of my connection flights, I spent an hour talking to this dude from Southern Texas. He was a political lobbyist, someone that you would never think. I didn't think the end of the conversation was going to end with a discussion about the psychoactive benefits of mushrooms. But it ended up exactly there. He told me he started working with a nonprofit about this, and it's we don't get too political, but it was a person that you never thought would talk about and be open to this type of, research and use. And that just kind of flipped the script on my mind a little bit, saying, we're probably to a place where this research can be pushed forward for the benefit of humanity instead of held down and kind of written in the secret book.
So the push isn't not necessarily to decriminalize or legalize as much as it is to deschedule. So right now, psilocybin and all psychedelic mushrooms are scheduled as Schedule 1 controlled substance. That's the same as cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin, etc. So if you're producing them, you now have a clandestine line, clandestine laboratory where you're producing a Schedule 1 controlled substance. If you go over any state lines, now you're talking about federal prison time real fast, and a lot of it, right? And if there's a loaded handgun there, it's, 10 years for a bullet or whatever, right? So there are a lot of things in the way. The big push right now is to deschedule it so that it's not even it doesn't belong on the same list as amphetamines and opiates, right? It's just a totally different caliber substance across the board. And until that descheduling occurs, there's just too many roadblocks for a lot of the science. But at the same time, the dam is breaking. There are more people than ever, especially, with cannabis legalization. That's contrary to federal law, and cannabis is still a Scheduled 1 controlled substance too. However, we're seeing more and more municipalities and states give the finger to the feds and say that we think that this is good for our population, or our population wants this because it's, government of, for, and by the people, right? And I'm really excited for that day. That'll be a really cool day in human consciousness whenever folks can get access to what they need without having to worry about those issues. And it should be a fun day, too, to hear all the giggling.
Yeah. She had talked about kind of the dangers of procuring those and studying them.
That's the most dangerous part about it, is getting them.
Yeah, and they were, kind of like, it's strange because a lot of times in educational research, it falls under the guise of conformity, right? So they were a group of people that really had to buck a trend and take risks involved because of something they were passionate about and believed in. Really sucked me in, and that's what got me even more interested in mushrooms, because I had thought about this stuff in passing, and I love eating mushrooms, but just something that has the capability and the benefits that hearing you describe the system of how a mushroom works, it seems bigger than what I like to put on my steak, right?
Right. Well, if we look at those compounds, psilocybin, right, which is the active compound in psilocybe, the genus mushrooms, it's arguably that's actually put out there to keep bugs from eating that mushroom. It's basically an insecticide of sorts. But we, being the funny monkeys we are, we're like, oh man, that mushroom make the sky turn purple, or whatever.
Yeah.
Give me more of that. So I'm always curious about, how it all started, with man coming out of the jungle, so to speak, and patrolling across the plains and encountering it, whether it's like Terrence McKenna, who is really, really full of crap, and Paul Stamets, his best friend, say, or, how that all happened, and the rise of human culture and what information has been suppressed along the way because of, the fungi are arguably our first libation, so to speak. The first rule of, the Puritan beer law is no psychedelics are allowed in beer, right? Because beer was just a vessel for storage of those fungi beforehand, right? Mead originated as a storage vessel for those magic mushrooms, so to speak. So they would make a libation out of it. They would store, all right, honey doesn't rot. We all know that, right? It's antimicrobial. You store the mushrooms inside the honey. Guess what? They don't rot. You can pull them out for sacramental use at a later time. Now, add a little bit of water to that. What are we making? We're making mead. And we have mead infused with psychedelics, right? That's the cheapest preservative, alcohol. So it didn't take very long for humans started to figure that out, and then beer and all of that came later. But before all of that, the first booze that humans ever drank was just as a preservative for magic mushrooms.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I never heard that.
Yeah, and it's ironic that our booze lobby in Wisconsin is, probably what's keeping cannabis from being legalized to a large degree, and definitely going to be a voice against this, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Man, that's fascinating to think about. I had never heard that. You hear it, like there's so many of those stories that you can find where, this population at this time in history was affected by this, all the way to like biblical stuff that's connected to different effects of, eating mushrooms. But I had never heard that one. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, as that happened in our past, our brains grew, right? And then, we began to evolve with it over time. And our brains began to really rapidly advance at the same time. Oh, then we stunted all this. Now, what happens when we begin doing this as a society again? What's the next evolution of our brain going to look like?
Right. Yeah. What will the history books say in 2,000 years from now about the years 2100,
And it'll all be documented this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating, man. Well, lot of depth there. I appreciate you coming on and chatting, and it was just good getting to know you. That it's just such a fascinating space. What's next on the horizon for your? It's probably coming up to busy season for the food plot thing, right? Like, what kind of studies do you have in mind?
So I've executed a multi-tier approach with launching this business. I did a lot of guerrilla marketing. As you can imagine, there was a lot of you open one door and people say you're batshit crazy, and you open the next door and say you're a genius, right? So there was a lot of this, just getting the word out that this is a thing about deer and mushrooms. So I went after the top tier. So this would be like Mississippi State University's Deer Lab. Dr. Bronson Strickland, who's maybe the authority, and Steve Damaris are the authorities on deer right now. Dr. Deer, Dr. James Kroll. All of these top level of what's the word I'm looking for? Researchers. And then I also went after the top tier hunters, guys like our Wisconsin's own Dan Infalt, right? Who's the big buck serial killer. He's my personal favorite living hunter. He's basically the new Fred Bear of sorts, right? And Don Higgins down in Illinois, and Kip Adams, president of the NDA, which is formerly the QDMA, right? And so podcasters and other influencers, and hey, basically on a prove it premise. I've got this product, you've got land, let's see what the deer do, right? Here's my results, here's yours. Shared all my research, and we're right in the pocket now. It's all beginning to bear fruit. And this will be the first hunting season that other humans other than me have got a chance to see this and employ it. So the first ones I made were at a Mossy Oak Field Day in Indiana in April. And those are producing fruit right now. And that landowner told me that the deer are all over it. And he's not going in there to check that camera because it's too close to hunting season. And there's bucks in there that he's really proud of. So I'm stoked. And it's kind of becoming a reoccurring theme across landowners. We'll see what happens. The next 2 years are going to be fascinating in the deer world because of this. So I'm kind of I'm past the Prove It tour, which was this summer, and now I'm on the Breakout tour, which is people are starting to see for themselves. Word's getting out. I'm starting to book more and more appearances, and I really want to be the hunting world's mushroom guy. Hunting world ought to have a mushroom guy. I love to hunt. It seems like a natural fit to me. It seems like everything that I ever did in my life and God ever did for me pointed me right to this spot. And that's a warm, fuzzy feeling to feel like you're where you belong, when you belong there. And, and it's all through the grace of God, of course, and my wife and our family. But I'm really excited about what the future holds right now. So MyCoHabitat is my other business, Myco being Latin for mushroom and habitat being obvious. But if you break that word down differently, it's MyCoHabitat, meaning we cohabitate these spaces with the animals. Right. And so there's something there for us, too. So I'm making a fungal rich. Basically, I call it fungicentrism. I approach everything from a fungal standpoint first instead of thinking about it later. I feed the soil feeds the plants. It's that easy. Right. The soil, food web, the fungi in it can change the pH. They can change the mineral content. They can do everything. All you've got to do is help them. So why the heck do I want to do all this work when I can put the mushroom to work? And so that's my new goal, is to educate landowners. So if we're in a traditional open food plotting system, we can build you some amazing soil smartly out of waste resources. If you're a landowner that has, timber, that you don't want to bring down, or rocky ground or pines or whatever it may be. Pines are, the hardest part for a deer hunter because deer love pines, but what are you going to grow in there? You can't get any food in there. Well, this excels in pines. Right, so changing the focus from, where it's been with these I would like to call them tractor riders setting the script, right? Where we got to plan all this and all this expensive seed has to be put down every year and you've got to spray and change the focus to here's a food that they're already eating. They're crushing this food and we can grow it, right? And instead of leaving it all willy-nilly scattered around the landscape, we can make a hyper concentration in one spot, a honey hole, so to speak, right?
And accessible to people who don't have tillable land. That's another huge piece.
Yeah,
of it.
what happens if your ground's too rocky or it's too vertical or you're not allowed to do anything? Grandpa won't let you cut down a tree. It'll be your farm in 20 years, but it's Grandpa's farm till then.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be. This is a suitable option and maybe your only option. If you're in an area where I'm at, there's such high deer numbers. Good luck getting any crops off the ground without electric fencing, brother. But we can get this off the ground.
Yeah. You had to when you were kind of taking that initial tour, right, and talking to these people that have hunted for years and years and years. Did you run into anybody that said they had used mushrooms in their hunting strategies?
No one has ever used mushrooms to target deer as far as growing them. There are hunters who know that this is a thing, and it's one of their best kept secrets, and they're not exactly too happy that it's getting communicated.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for those guys. It was part of my wheelhouse, too. I just gave away my best kept secret. So, it goes both sides. I mean, there are people who are professors, who say, every deer in the Upper Peninsula is starving. And if a deer is eating a mushroom, it's because it's starving, right? And despite the science to the contrary, so you have to learn to let stuff roll off your sleeve. And it's pretty hard for me as a people pleaser to hear that kind of crap, but it's just the way folks are. And you just got to keep going forward and do you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've hunted for a long time, been around a lot of hunters, and it's nothing I ever even thought of. And I don't know why. Not talking about it, it makes complete sense.
It took me a long time to come to grips with it too. I spent the first few years just trying to disprove this, like just get it off my plate, get it out of my brain. Okay, this is the thing that I saw, and as a mushroom farmer and forager, the deer tearing up my mushrooms. Maybe it's a neighborhood kid coming by or a cat or I don't know. Then any excuse
Birds
you
or
want,
something,
anything. Right? Maybe they're doing it, but it's just an anomaly because the deer are so. And I spent a few years trying to disprove it, and I couldn't disprove it. And that's when I knew it was something legit. And, of course, back then, this was pre-pandemic. It seems like every scientific paper got uploaded during the pandemic, but there was nothing. It was really scouring the internet to find very little information. And then since then, I've been able to, build a big body of knowledge with this and a lot of resources that I've been able to uncover and so on. So there's definitive proof now. We're way past the proof stage. But it took a while. It took me a few years to be like, okay, I'm not as crazy as I think, Deer actually eat this. And I would talk to old timers, and one old timer would say, oh, yeah, they do. I've shot, whenever I used to bow hunt, I hunted over honey mushrooms every year. And then the next old timer, I've been in the woods my whole life and never seen that. And, and I could see that, because even if you know what to look for the proof, it's pretty hard to find the evidence. They're a little bit of a sloppy eater, and that helps your cause because there'll be like a definitive bite mark out of this mushroom and a few crumbles here, and you can kind of see their tracks as they walked, and there's a few more crumbles along, and you begin to pick things out like that, and then you find a video where someone made friends with deer and they're 5 feet away from them, filming them eating all these mushrooms, and you can't believe that this person has access to that animal like that, and so it's been on a pretty intense roller coaster.
Yeah, that was a piece of the discovering that you sent me the other day, right? I was surprised, and they had like canned footage of
So that guy's name is Richard Smith. He's an outdoor writer and I guess a would-be researcher and biologist. He's a citizen scientist. I can't bash on that. I'm a citizen scientist. I don't know him. I just heard his name for the first time the other day when that came out. But I was filming with the guy who runs that show, Brian, in the 906 Outdoors. And we're filming like multiple days before that episode was to be released. Now, he has another camera person that works with him, a lady who hosts the show, right? Because he's having health issues and stuff like that and kind of taking a step back. Well, she filmed that up in Marquette with that guy. And Brian just kind of said something about it and kind of brushed it off. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so we began to talk about it. He's like, oh, you'll see when it airs. Okay. So we finished filming all about mushroom food plots and mushrooms and deer. And that airs September 11th on Discovery. And then, Monday night that airs or whatever. Well, I don't really watch TV, but I thought about it afterwards. So I checked YouTube and holy crap, this guy's, he's got amazing footage and he's 5 yards away from these deer that he's befriended. And, I'm not there in person, so I had no way of saying that, he didn't put something on the mushroom, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not trying to cast shade on the guy or anything like that.
But they're crushing mushrooms
in they're eating mushrooms right there in front of them, and they're eating the same mushrooms I see him eat, and that everything looks on par right now with what I found. And I'm not trying to endorse this guy because I feel like there are a lot of people that really hate him. And I'm not sure what that's about. And I'm not trying to lump my eggs in his basket or anything. But it just so happens that his footage supports what I found.
Yeah, and because I was surprised to see that, because you said, I think seasoned hunters in the woods could we've all probably seen them eat mushrooms at times, but it's not something that we.
Well, 20 yards away, can you connect that that's an acorn or a mushroom? What's he eating?
Exactly, right. Exactly.
Especially add some browse or some woody vegetation in between. Now you're looking through obstacles.
Yep, 100%. And like you said, they take that bite. It's in their mouth. It's a leaf. It's an acorn. It's whatever's on the ground. We don't know what they're eating. So, and that's not, at least for me, and I think probably for most hunters, it's not the first thing that I've been looking for in the woods when I'm trying to, find a place to hunt or what that deer is eating or where it's sleeping. So I think it's probably been pretty glossed over by a lot of us that just something that's, trivial. But like I said, it when you talk about it, it makes so much sense because we eat them. Yeah. Why wouldn't the deer?
Why wouldn't they? Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm looking for it. I'm a forager. I'm looking for mushrooms. I'm a mushroom farmer. I'm around mushrooms. I hunt too. I love watching the deer show. We call it deer TV, out at the farm, watching the deer out on the alfalfa fields and such, right? And just one of those things, even though I'm all those things, it took me a while to see it. And not only to see it, but put value on it, to say, okay, yes, deer eat mushrooms. I grow mushrooms. Well, now I hate the deer, right? Or you can look at it the opposite side and say, oh, man, I got a golden opportunity here to find out what mushrooms deer like that I can grow, right? And that's kind of the way, we call it embracing the suck in the guide world, right? You got to turn that dark spot into from the silver lining into your brightest moment, and if you can do that, you win at everything, right? And so your perspective is everything, and your attitude's everything in life. So I began to get less down on the deer eating the mushrooms and how much I hated them for doing it, and more optimistic about, well, hold on, this is something we could take advantage of. And the NDA's own, National Deer Association, their own charts bear out that during hunting season, from the beginning of September on or whatever, the amount of mushrooms that they eat is on a huge rise, right? So the most conservative NDA chart is going to show them at 10 to 15%. At the same time, it's going to show crops and grasses being reduced as part of their diet. So how much money and time are we spending on growing crops for these damn things? Mm-hmm. There's a better way.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense. You start thinking about crops getting harvested. The growing season comes to an end.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, the nutritive quality, goes down. Yep. Unless it's beans or peas or winter wheat or rye or whatever. And even then, it's growth stage specific. If your cereal grains aren't under 10 inches, they're not preferred and stuff like that.
Yeah, and preferred is a key term. That's what you were talking about earlier, because we think about it as an opportunist, right? I think that's probably a lot of people's initial thought of a deer eating is, if it's there, I'm going to eat it. But that's not what I've witnessed.
If it's there and it's awesome, I'm going to eat it.
Exactly.
Imagine going to your fridge at 2 a.m. and all your favorite things are in there, and then there's a whole bunch of very healthy stuff. Which ones are you going to take out? It's a no-brainer. You ain't going to Taco Bell at 2 a.m. to get a salad, brother. You're going to get the grilled double stuffed steak burrito or whatever, right? Okay, it's the same thing with them when they hit the salad bar, the buffet. They're not after the salad bar, so to speak. They're looking for the best part. This is their steak, man. This is your steak dinner, literally, hands down.
Yeah, and different times of year makes so much, makes so much of a difference too. Because, like you were saying, with the summer food going down, we all see the ebbs and flows on trail cameras, right? About like you'll have a ton of deer for a whole month, and then seemingly they're all gone, but not connected to the rut. Different times of the year, so like spring, winter, they're moving because of food and cover. So when you can connect to those two things the way that you can with mushrooms, I think it's a pretty unique space.
Yeah, I mean, this is akin to having a great baiting setup and deep cover.
Yeah.
Only the thing is the bait costs a lot of money, and you have to go in there all the time. With this, we just drop it, and it's good for 5 years.
I was going to ask that. How long, when do you call it planting? What is it?
Yeah, we'll use the word cultivate or planting, whatever. So we're going to assemble or cultivate the plot, right, which is about the size of a pool table for what we call a starter pack, and then a level pickup truck load of sawdust. We make this out of straw and sawdust, right? Waste resources. And you can skip the straw if you want to, but it'll be more productive if you use it, right? I get straw for free after Halloween, right? Or, the giant Pine Mountain ski jump, right? Well, I don't go to that because there's a lot of drunk people that are jerks, but there's a million straw bales in that parking lot afterwards. So a lot of winter activities like that, right? Even Lambeau Field after tailgating day, you might be able to cruise through there in the tailgating area and pick you up a bale of straw, right? Or two. And then a sawmill. Are you kidding me? This is northern Wisconsin in the UP. There's a sawmill there. I mean, they outnumber bars and churches, which is saying something up here. So, and even if it didn't, your municipality has, the wood chips, or whatever, right? Well, all that is mushroom food, right? As long as it's not straight up pine sawdust, it works. And so we get these really cheap or free materials. For me, they're mostly free. One level pickup truck of sawdust is 2 yards roughly, and that's 2 bags of spawn, 2 bales of straw, and that pickup truck is enough to do 2 giant pool table sized areas or 1 big one. We call that the double down, and it's going to produce food. Depending on how aggressive you are with it, because you can water it, make it a nonstop irrigation thing. We can definitely manipulate this to produce food when we want it, which is really big, right? But if we water it, we're going to get it to rot faster, so it's not going to last as long. Does that make sense? We're just going to make it grow more mushrooms faster instead of letting it grow the same amount of mushrooms over a longer timeline. We make it last 5 years easily. 8 years is it wouldn't be too uncommon to see a couple random mushrooms 8 or 10 years later in that same spot. I'm not going to say it's going to blanket the floor like it is whenever it's going in its prime, but it wouldn't be uncommon. And the byproduct is 2 to 3 inches of beautiful black compost that's left over. And I mean amazing quality compost. It takes a forest 50 to 100 years to make an inch of soil. The best regenerative agriculture practices, 35 to 50 years. Okay, we can do it in as little as 2 or 3. That's insane. And it improves the browse quality of all the plants nearby. Deer are selective, right? Improved browse quality, improved food. That's what I just heard. It makes those plants right around this more attractive, which kind of is a 1-2 punch, right? And if you wanted to put a little food plot in there, do this first, let it all rot down in the beautiful soil, and then open up the canopy in that spot if you wanted to, right? You have gorgeous soil there. Or you just add new wood chips every few years,
just so they have something to eat, right?
We've got, another straw bale or a little bit more wood chips, like a half yard instead of a whole yard or whatever. Every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, what do you got? What do you have access to, and when can you get out there? It's the best time to do any habitat works right now. Second best time is as soon as you have a moment. And just like planting a fruit tree, the best time to put this in is right now. Second best time is, as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear that. Is there a place for that, or is that happening already where mushrooms are becoming more ingrained with agriculture anywhere?
Not really. So
is there a place for it that you found or know?
There's a huge place for this. So if you have cows, which are also ruminants, and you want to save some money on your feed bill, this is a really smart thing for you to put in your property, right? Because the cows at the farm where I was, they weren't my cows, so I'm not allowed to feed them mushrooms. But for some reason, they keep breaking out of their pastures and coming in there and eating all my mushrooms. So you tell me if they like it, you know? But if I had a herd of cows, I'd be doing this in a heartbeat, because if I save $1 off my feed cost, it's worth it. And I know it's going to improve the browse quality of everything nearby. So what I'm doing now is I'm experimenting with combining this with the traditional food plot on that edge setting. So basically I'm making a big 10-foot wide mushroom food plot that's hundreds of feet long, just one truckload of sawdust at a time, all the way around the edge of a food plot, right? Well, that's going to improve the nutrient shuttling in that food plot, and it's going to increase the browse quality in that food plot. It's also going to add a new layer of food around the edge of that food plot, right? But if I did this in conjunction with agriculture in particular, man, I could really, really, feed some cows with something like this. For me, I have such insane deer numbers that I just need as much food as I can on the ground. And it has to be perennial, and it has to grow back. So clover and mushrooms are where I'm concentrating my perennial effort right now. And browse, hinge cutting trees. That's the best stuff we can feed our deer is those stump sprouts. Those are insanely nutritious, whether it's a hinge cut tree or a tree that we've cut off and that this is trying to regrow again, or those sprouts and that, those buds and things like that are as nutritious as any alfalfa or more nutritious. And the guy who's been my mentor in this industry, he kind of invented that, so to speak, hinge cutting. His name's Jim Ward. He's very famous in the outdoor industry. And if he has happened to listen in, thank you, Jim, for everything. But for years, everybody told him he was batshit crazy. Literally, the experts came right out against him. And then eventually, a biologist got a hold of it and said, hold up, there's a lot to this. And they never quite, took him in or whatever and said, yep, Jim's been right the whole time, or whatever. But he was for 15 plus years before folks started buying into it. And all the other folks in the deer world that, hire consultants and stuff, they know who he is. And there's a reason that they're all starting to hinge cut and so on and so forth, right? And Jim does much more than hinge cutting. I'm going to say that right now. But that's really, him sticking to his guns like that. I'm very fortunate to be able to use, have him as a mentor, so to speak, in this industry. But he went through, kind of that long road of just everybody says you're crazy, you shouldn't be believing what you're seeing. You're making more out of this than it should be. And so it's kind of ironic that God brought us both together and, said, hey, you're getting ready to go through hell with this where everyone's going to think you're crazy. You need this guy, So for whatever it's worth.
Yeah. What about like crop agriculture? Does anybody use mushrooms in any ways there?
So that's where this mushroom that we're using originated, though it's grown extensively in open field ag systems and China right now. And then after a couple of years, they actually turn it over. They're using it to remediate the land. So it becomes beautiful, fertile soil at the end, right? And so they can sell the land for a very high markup versus what they bought it after they grow mushrooms there for a few years. And that's kind of one of the strategies that you're seeing over and over in the ag world. I believe it was Romania where this really came to be, for farming this particular mushroom called Stropharia or wine cap, right? They would grow wheat field, and then on the edge of the wheat field, they would grow this. So all that their chaff and their leftovers would get shuttled over to this, and they would grow the mushroom there, right, with the waste right on the edge. And then, of course, the compost would happen, and they'd shuttle that back in. And that's a little more moving stuff around than I like to do. But that was the way that they did it. And, of course, it gave them higher yields, much, much higher yields. So there is a lot of people who use this in your garden. I don't recommend that. There are better mushrooms to grow in your garden. And the reason I say that is this mushroom occurs frequently, and it rots really fast, too. It doesn't stand up very well in refrigeration. It's only good for like 5 days in refrigeration. And it doesn't stand up really well out in the field. So you're going to have a ton of fungus gnats and other insects, which if you're an organic farmer, you kind of want that because you want the whole soil food web and the food web of the spiders and the praying mantises to prosper. But what you're really doing is double dog daring the deer to jump that fence and destroy your crops, and rabbits and squirrels, right?
Right.
But there are other mushrooms, especially those that are fall specific, like the bluet, that are really, they do the same thing for your soil. They're a little bit slower, but they do the same thing for your soil. And then they only fruit in the autumn, which means that, you don't have to deal with all the buggy, nasty mushrooms that you can just let them rot and deal with the consequences, or you can pick them all, whether you're going to use them or not, and then have to deal with that constantly. So there are a lot of folks who will tell people, oh yeah, use wine cap in your garden. I don't think so. As a person who's ran large scale gardens, I can tell you that I personally believe that's a terrible idea in comparison. Unless you have it high fenced off and you love mushrooms and you want to deal with picking them all the time, because you're going to pick a lot all the time. I personally recommend the Blue It for the garden, but it does have crossover. You can use this. I'm working with a few seed companies right now, particularly one that I really like, Vitalize Seed Company. They're Michigan-based. Shout out Jared now. And they have a 1-2 part system. So the first part in the spring is called Nitro Boost, and the second part in the autumn is called Carbon Load. Now, for things to rot properly and move through the soil, we need to balance carbon and nitrogen ratio, about 24-1. You say 20 or 30 parts to 1, somewhere in there. And so this is kind of designed for that. And then also they use a lot of inoculants to help bolster your soil and get your food web going, which I really love. But also it's extremely diverse in their blend. And one of the things I'm working with them is to reduce the thatch or the overburden that tends to accumulate in food plots. You use rye, then you come in and crimp it, and then you go in with buckwheat in the spring, and then, you kind of get a layer of thatch built up real fast. Well, this mushroom is very aggressive in that regard, and it will actually begin to eat that thatch. So it's saprotrophic. A lot of times the thatch builds up because the mycorrhizal, or the mushrooms that are good with plants that are in that living arrangement in the soil, they're not really suited to eating all that dead overburden on top. They need a different mushroom that is good at eating dead stuff, right? Called a saprotroph, or saprophytic mushroom. So when you put those two in play together, now that saprophyte is feeding the ectomycorrhizal or the endomycorrhizal in the soil, and beautiful things begin to happen, right? Because it's balanced and it's appropriate. And so by installing this saprotroph or saprophytic mushroom into this system, we can get a lot more biological life to happen faster. And like we said earlier here, where everything has that short decomposition window, right? We can get a lot more decomposition faster in
a shorter time.
You've got it. So we're reducing the overburden. Let's say it's a maple stand that has too many leaves on the ground. This is common, right? Or there's just a lot of small sticks or whatever it may be. Well, this mushroom is native to North America, the entire northern hemisphere of the world, for that matter, right? So it's just not very commonly occurring. However, when you begin to put it on your property, you wouldn't be surprised after a few years you start to see it in a couple random spots. And what it'll do is begin to eliminate that overburden and kick your soil life back up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can...
And it'll just kind of leap out on its own. When the deer eat it, they're the perfect vessel for passing those spores on, right? So they eat the mushroom, then they walk through the forest and then deposit, the biomass back down after they've ruminated it. And that biomass is the perfect vessel for the spores to germinate in and give it a new spot of real estate.
And it starts off with some food, right?
You got it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like nature's design if you really think about it. It's almost smarter than we are.
Absolutely. Well, that's not surprising. Yeah. It is in a lot of ways. I appreciate you coming on, man. It was an awesome conversation. I hope your business kills it, and I hope you just keep on doing great things.
Man, I wish that all that would happen as well, and I appreciate you guys for having me in here. We're going to shout out Dan, the producer.
Yeah, Dan's doing it.
Yep. Yeah. And, of course, if folks don't know, you and I have talked before up north whenever you used to live in the UP, and it's always good to talk with you, Brad. And even though Buckskin Bob's not in the corner of the room cracking jokes and with his canned oyster mushrooms.
Yeah.
I love Bob Black. He's an amazing up north figure,
He is, man.
I hope they erect a statue to him after he passes. Hopefully he passes many years from now. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to sporulate some minds. And if you or anybody else ever wants to talk about this again, you know where I'm at.
Appreciate you, Matt.
Appreciate you.